Hello and welcome to Castle's Corner. I'm joined today by Imran Usami, and I'm very glad to have him on here. He is a multiple PhD. He is a medical doctor by profession, and he's going to be debating the merits of religion or evidence for God, I believe. So the benefits of religion, if it can be attained through religion as opposed to secular means, and evidence for God. This will probably be 30 or 40 minutes or so, guys. I'll try to give you some highlights at the end. But for right now, I just wanted to say a very big thank you for coming on. You're the first person to actually officially accept the challenge. And as far as I know, you're okay with me posting the video too. So you'll be the first, and I really appreciate it. We've already been chatting for a minute, just getting to know each other. And we just hit record. So would you mind introducing yourself, what you do, and then I suppose your position, and then I'll give my position, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. So I'm a medical doctor by profession. I've been a doctor for nearly 20 years. I've also got science degrees. So I have a degree in mathematics, physics, and a PhD in mathematics as well. I think what I'm going to talk about today is perhaps a different perspective than maybe people are used to on religion. Because, well, I'll get into that a bit later. But I think what I was talking about just before we started was that you and I both agree that within any profession, you have people who are honest and hardworking and good at what they do. And you have people who are dishonest and in it for selfish reasons and not really doing the best for their patients or customers or whatever it is that they do.
And in-betweens too. In-betweens too.
And people in between, yeah. So this has been my experience in the medical profession, for example, where you do have doctors who are really committed to doing the best for their patients. And they don't mind putting in the extra effort, they don't mind putting in the extra time, even if it's unpaid, to make sure that they give the best possible care and evidence-based care to their patients. Meanwhile, you have other doctors who unfortunately exploit their patients, especially in private practice. Not all, but there are doctors out there who convince patients to have procedures they don't need, investigations they don't need, and so on. So, and what we were talking about is that when you're trying to decide if a doctor is good or honest, or on the other hand, dishonest, it doesn't really help you to know anything about that person's demographics. So if that person is Muslim or Christian or atheist or black or white or Asian, or young or old or male or female, none of those things actually tell you anything about whether that doctor is going to be honest or dishonest, whether that builder is going to be honest or dishonest. You have no idea from those things. But there definitely are these two types of people, right? There are definitely good people out there and not good people, evil people. Now, for me, religions really, so the religious scriptures, right? So the Jewish scripture, the Christian scripture, the gospel, the Muslim scripture, the Quran, are predominantly about right and wrong. It's about good and evil. That's what they are about primarily. The religious traditions that have developed on top of these scriptures are not about those things, right? So the religious scriptures, if you look at the history, particularly the history of Christianity and the history of Islam, where we have a lot of historical information, we know that these religious traditions gradually took form over about 2 or 3 centuries. And then once they took form, they enforced their views on followers of that religion. And they persecuted people who disagreed with them. So, I mean, the Catholic Church, you know this, how they enforce their views, how they
have
enforce their views.
Lot to apologize for, you know. But
Yeah.
that aside, just just to kind of keep things a tad more brief here, if I may, you're basically saying that the religious structure, independent of what is written, is primarily a story guide to lead people towards the good.
Sorry, say that again. The religious scripture.
So like the religious, let's call it a substructure, even though it's not entirely accurate, but the religious substructure that either let's call it predates or is still around in spite of the religious text is independent of what the religious texts say, as the religious texts themselves are outdated. Is that the argument you're making?
No, the argument I'm making is that the religious scriptures, so the Torah, the Gospel, the Quran, the religious scriptures are primarily about good and evil, right and wrong, true and false. But the religious traditions, that is Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the religions that we know today, and we assume that these religions are representative of the views expressed in the underlying scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
These religious traditions are not about right and wrong. These religions are tribal, right? They're about a certain set of doctrines that the church or Sunni Muslim clergy have formulated and then tried to enforce on populations. I mean, if you go back.
Okay, so here's my question then. So here's my question. Because right now we are living here and now. Right now we're living now. So we have to take the way that people are perceiving religions as the way they perceive it and the way they interact it in their lives now, currently today. So currently today, when they poll the Muslim countries, the ones will allow them to poll, 77% of people are okay with infidels being stoned. That's 77% of the entire population of Muslims who allowed us to poll them. Most countries, the extreme countries, did not allow us to poll them, which means basically 100% probably. They're totally okay. 77% of these people, well over, I don't know the exact math, but that's well over 9 million people in the world, even if it's only 5%, which is a lot more than that, believe it's totally okay to stone someone to death for burning a book, a fictional fantasy book. They believe it's totally okay to blow themselves up in the name of their God, and in fact, they will get a better place at his side. Christians believe in today's day and age that if they pray, a bearded man is going to answer their prayers if they pray hard enough. This is a large subset of humanity. This is a huge portion of the population who truly do believe this. There are huge portions of priests of every religion who enforce this. This is currently today, not backwards 6,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, none of these times. This is currently today. And this is what I'm arguing against. And this is what I'm fighting against. The fact that we cannot make pictures of the Prophet Muhammad and mock him. Why is religion above mockery or criticism? Why is that? Why is religion even in politics for any reason? In America, you're not allowed to be elected to any form of position in power in politics if you identify as an atheist. You must identify as believing in a God of some form. This is how religion is treated today, now. And this is what I'm trying to talk about now.
What I'm talking about. So if you want to talk about religion in the world today, Christianity and Islam in the world today, then we don't have a disagreement. Because I actually.
I'm sorry, so I misunderstood your point apparently. So then what are you arguing for? That religion has some form of benefit still?
No. So let me just repeat what I said because
maybe different words. I didn't follow. I guess I didn't follow. So right. Maybe different words if you could.
What I'm saying is that the religious scriptures, the Torah, the Gospel, the Quran, they have a message which is centered on the distinction between right and wrong.
Okay, I could agree with that.
Trying to educate readers about right and wrong, the difference between right and wrong.
Okay, so agreed.
But what I'm saying is that the religious traditions have a very different agenda.
Okay, agreed.
There's a huge disagreement, gap between what the religious scriptures are focused on and what religious traditions do. And I'm not just talking about today, I'm talking about historically.
Okay, so my
about religious traditions, I agree with you that the religious traditions are really very problematic, and they have been for many centuries. But what I'm just trying to say is that the original scriptures on which these religions were founded, they are actually pretty sound and useful books.
I would disagree with even that, though. I mean, now, so let me put it to you this way. Maybe a different perspective. We both like science, obviously. I believe, well, yeah, I won't even go there yet. Let's put it this way. Religion, from a different perspective, is our first attempt at explaining the world through science. It's our first attempt at psychoanalysis. It's our first attempt at getting collectives of people together towards a greater good. It's our first attempt at a lot of things. But we've advanced science to a point where we don't have to believe the vast majority of insanity in the Bible. It's all fake, it's made up, it's obviously not true. The stuff in the Quran, I mean, nobody actually believed a guy flew to heaven on a winged horse. Back in the day, they would believe that. Nowadays, we know there's no such thing as heaven. And if it is heaven, it's a different dimension. It's certainly not in the sky. You certainly cannot fly there on a horse. I could keep going. But these basically, religion's basically a first attempt at understanding the world that we did not understand. Lightning, you got a lightning god. You got the water, you got the water god. Then it gets more advanced, it gets more advanced. My thing is, let's just take Christianity. What Christianity states in its literature are good stories. They are a hero's journey. It gives you a very clear distinction between heaven and hell. But also in that context, it basically says to you, if you're not a good person, Sky Daddy God is going to punish you and send you to hell for all eternity. On top of that, Sky Daddy really cares about what kind of sex you have. He really cares about how you live your life. These are all in the original scriptures. None of these things has any bearing whatsoever on reality. There is exactly zero evidence for any God. Religion is entirely a man-made thing. There is no book that has any evidence it was written by a divine creator. Every religious text is man-made. Obviously, just considering that religion is all over the world, there's 18,000 different gods, which are, of course, man-made, or else the actual God who does exist did a very bad job of explaining himself. Or the God which does exist, he doesn't actually care to provide any of us with evidence to the fact that he does exist. And the fact that he chose to show himself in a backwater city where the people couldn't even read or write for the first time, and never again since then, in the case of Christianity, should be very telling. I don't think that the scriptures have any use whatsoever. I think back in the day, I mean, to your point, back in the day, yeah, 100%, they probably helped a lot of people, but they also probably hurt a lot of people. They kept a lot of people in a state of constant anxiety, worried about going to hell. They had a lot of people worried about their parents for no good reason. They caused the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition. We wouldn't be able to have this discussion right now if any one particular religion had won out, because they would be silencing all forms of discussion about other religions. We can have this discussion in spite of the fact that religions exist. Again, so even back in the day, it was good. It was probably the best they had, but it still wasn't accurate. It still wasn't true. It was just the best for what they had at the time. I have no complaints about that, but when you find something better, and we have over the past many thousands of years, you should go with that. And as previously mentioned, in the current day and age, I see no reason whatsoever for any form of religion to exist, considering it has no evidence whatsoever for its creation. It has no evidence that anything a religious person can do, there's nothing you can do morally that I cannot do as an atheist. There's no action you can take in the entire world that I cannot take as well as an atheist. I mean, the term atheist, even the last thing I'll say is the term atheist, it shouldn't even exist. We don't have a word for people who don't believe in fairies. We don't have a word for people who don't believe in the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. These are just rational people who require evidence before any form of likelihood or unlikelihood crosses their mind. If nobody had ever informed these people of God or whatever another, they would never have the concept of it. But anyways, that was a long rant, sorry, but that's kind of my position about all of that. So
I don't think you're quite understanding what I'm saying. I mean,
you're arguing for a past thing, though. You're arguing for something in the past, which even if it was in the past and good at the time, has
No,
no
no.
bearing on now.
Actually, are you able to actually say back to me my position, the position that
Okay,
I've
so you're saying that at the moment, what is actually written down in the traditions of the church, what the church is preaching right now, the way that they're trying to accumulate money and power and enforcing their viewpoints and these things, this goes against the original texts. You're saying that religion, yeah, and I get that. You're saying that these are original texts, the original messages were the good and bad, the heroes during. Again, I'm not disagreeing with any of that,
right.
but
And
it doesn't.
when you say that these, so that's why a lot of your criticisms are about the religious traditions, and that's irrelevant to what I'm talking about, because I'm talking about the scriptures as opposed to the traditions.
And that's fine though. But even the scriptures are wrong. They're
Well,
incorrect. They're non-scientific.
the thing is that your interpretation of the scriptures is based on the religious traditions. You're basically taking the religious traditions and saying that they are an accurate representation of the teachings of the scripture.
Okay, okay. So let's change it around then.
But let me just say where we started the conversation, because what you're saying is that we don't need these religious scriptures anymore.
We don't need any religion for any reason.
But right at the beginning of our conversation, we talked about how we live in a scientific era, and we have scientists and doctors, people who are scientifically trained, yet there are still among them bad scientists, evil scientists.
Of course, yeah.
So science hasn't solved the problem of good and evil. Good and evil still exists.
Oh, I see.
Science.
Okay,
right?
I think
therefore, the scientific progress that we've made is not sufficient. You do need moral instruction too. You do need to be able to distinguish right from wrong. That's where the religious scriptures come in.
Okay. I think I see what you're saying now, but let me try to counter that though. Okay. So for example, I until 2 years ago never read a single piece of religious scripture in my life. I'm a very good, upstanding person my entire life. To the best of my abilities, I've tried to be good to everybody. I've hurt people unintentionally a lot, I'm sure. This, that, and the other. I've never once feared somebody punishing me for being bad. I'm just a good person for being a good person. Now, that being said, it sounds like what you're saying is that we need religion to give us morals. Is that what you're saying? Is that religion gives us morals?
You can recognize right and wrong without the religious scriptures. But the religious scriptures are there to help you. They're there
back in the day. So let put it this way. They were there to help you a long time ago because a lot of people were frankly, they basically raised and lived like animals. Basically most of humanity. Now, I don't want to get too much into the history of this, but for the point of time when religion was invented and where it was invented, this was how they were living. This was useful for them at the time. But let's just we'll take Christianity because I know that one best at the moment. All human morals have advanced in spite of Christianity. Christianity. Okay, hold up. Christianity specifically tells you in Leviticus how to get slaves, how to keep slaves, and how to trick your slaves into being your slaves forever. Jesus comes along. He never says, don't own slaves. He never says anything about it. So technically, if you are a Christian and a good Christian, you will have slaves. That's just one example of the fact that we no longer follow religious morals. We don't have slaves. We condemn people who have slaves nowadays. But if Christianity had their way, we would still have slaves now.
Going again to Christianity.
Okay, so let's go to the Quran. Let's go to the Quran then. We'll go to the Quran.
I've already said I'm not here to defend Christianity. I'm not here to defend Islam, right? The religious traditions, as far as I'm concerned, have almost nothing to do with the religious scriptures.
I get that, but that's in the religious scripture. That is in the religious scripture. That is right there in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Sorry, that was a different point. The slave, that's my fault. That's my fault. The slaves are on the Ten Commandments. But
let's talk about slavery, for example, right? Because this is an example.
If we could, I do want to kind of stay on your point because
okay.
I mean, but before we get off it, I want to stay here. So if I may, I'd like to ask you just a question about this. So my stance at the moment is there is zero evidence for a God. let me just finish. My stance at the moment is there's exactly zero evidence for a God. There's exactly zero evidence that any religion was founded by a God or any religious text was written by a God. Can we agree on that?
No. But what you're saying is there's zero evidence for the Judeo-Christian God.
No, for any God in the world.
Well, you don't know my conception of God. You don't know
Okay.
what I mean.
Okay, so we'll get to that in 1 second then, but this is my position. My position is never in the entire history has there ever been a single piece of evidence for God. Religion, there has never been a single case of or evidence at all that any religion in the world was created for or founded by a God. All religion is man-made, and it shows. Religion can accomplish absolutely nothing that cannot be accomplished through purely secular means. And in fact, religion takes humanity backwards because it makes us tribal and it teaches anti-education and to accept things on authority. This is my position. Now, from what I'm understanding, your position is that religion essentially, well, let's call it, for the sake of simplicity, because we're covering all religions, just let's call it true religion, the heart of religion, if you will, because this is all religions, whatever you want to call it, like the core concept of religion is a very good thing, which we can get our morals from, and we can ascertain good from evil. We can establish a hero's journey or staying away from the darkness, going towards the light, which, by the way, is something I also think is necessary. Staying away from a bad life and going towards a good life. I think that's 100% necessary. I think it's very important to have a blueprint for that. I think it's very important to have people show you how it's done and to also have it written down in concrete steps. I mean, I write these things myself. I think it's incredibly important. My question, I suppose, to you would be, could you give me your concept of God, why you think a God exists, basically, what evidence you have for it, and why that God cares about us and why we should care about religion when there are so many different religions to choose from, all of which are completely different from one another, and all of us as humans independently choose our morals. And if we choose our morals from religion, we're probably a pretty bad person, because all people who are actually moral will cherry pick their morals from religion. They don't follow religion 100%. They cherry pick some notions and they leave other ones aside. So your definition of God and why you think the true religious guide, I suppose, if that's okay to say it like that, the true religious guide is necessary, why it has to be religion?
So like I say, I think what I'm saying is perhaps a bit new to you. It's sort of an unusual idea. When you say religion, I think what you have in mind is something like Christianity, right?
Anything.
Yeah, but other religions as well, but Christianity, for example, right, as an example of a religion. Now, during the Enlightenment, Enlightenment philosophers, they identified that religion, meaning the church, was an impediment to scientific progress, right?
Agreed.
Because religious traditions like Christianity are based on dogmatism, right? Mm-hmm. They're based on these are our dogmas and you have to accept them, otherwise you'll be persecuted. And in science, you don't do that. In science, it's based on empiricism, right? Where you actually have evidence, you have an argument. If someone criticizes your argument, you listen to their criticism and so on. So,
and it's falsifiable. It's falsifiable.
Falsifiable as well. So the Enlightenment philosophers, they identified that religion, and when they said religion, they meant the church, right? Because it was mostly they were talking about the church, was an impediment. It was an impediment to progress, to scientific progress. I agree with that. I agree that religious dogmatism is a problem.
Okay.
Okay, so we don't have a disagreement about that at all.
So why do you believe in God?
Right. So what I'm saying is that when people use the word God has been hijacked by the religious traditions, the same religious traditions that I'm criticizing. So when people think of God, right, they're thinking of the Judeo-Christian conception of God.
Well, depending on the religion.
Who sets strict rules, wants you to do X, Y, Z, arbitrary set of rules. And if you don't do it, you go to hell. Yeah. That's the kind of conception of God that we have. What I'm saying is that the conception of God in the scriptures is not that, right? So, for example, let me tell you about the conception of God. Do you believe in objective truth?
So just to define that, that is truth outside of what we can technically perceive with our senses.
So, for example, objective truth would mean, do you believe that the earth has some shape? I'm not saying whether it's round or flat.
I mean,
it has a shape, and that shape is independent of what human beings think or believe.
Yeah, so outside of our senses, these things exist. Yeah, this is objective.
These things exist, and their precise nature or reality is independent of what people believe. Everybody on the planet, all human beings on the planet, would all agree that the Earth is a cube shape, right? But that won't actually affect the shape of the Earth.
Exactly.
Correct? 100%. So we call that objective truth.
Yep.
Right? We call that objective truth. Now, if you take the Quran, one of the names for God is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
God has many names, and one of those names is the truth. So to believe in God means to believe in objective truth, right?
Yeah, but now you're getting semantical. So I would ask you this then. So if you would say, so by that definition, by the way, by that definition, if the definition of God is all that is objectively true,
yes,
I would still have a problem with it. Because I would just say, why are you calling that God? Why are you using that word? It's just semantics. It's just semantics. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's semantics.
God is a word, right? Yeah. God is a sound that I'm making with my mouth.
Yeah.
I can replace that word with the truth.
Yeah, right? No disagreement.
If I ask you, do you believe in the truth? You would say yes.
Well, I mean, in context, but yeah, for sure. We'll go with it. Yeah, sure.
If I'm saying that the truth means everything that is objectively true, do you believe in
that? Just for simplicity's sake, let's say yes.
Yeah. Now, I didn't say you can necessarily attain it. There might be,
So then my next, I'm sorry, my next question, because I feel like we're getting somewhere finally. My next question is going to be let's solidify this. So your personal, I'm going to say personal, because this is definitely not how the vast majority of the world thinks. This is not how anybody who's religious thinks, generally speaking. I'm sure other people think like you, but there's very few of them. I've never met one. I usually meet the lunatics. So let's put it this way. Your definition of God would be the objective truth of the world, independent of what we know or can comprehend.
Independent of what we believe or think, yes.
Okay, cool. How does that affect your day-to-day life? And how does that affect your belief in the religious text as being necessary?
Okay, so for example, let me use a practical example of how you would apply this in your life. So, for example, in the States, you had, in 2020, you had a US presidential election. And after the election, you had the country divided to two groups. You had one group of people who said that the election was fair, and you had another group of people that said that the election was stolen.
The ones who didn't care.
Sorry?
The ones who didn't give a shit, too.
Well, you had this disagreement, right? You had a disagreement
between
two people. And these two beliefs are incompatible. Right?
Yes. One thing objectively happened. One thing objectively happened. Yes.
Right.
Which one was
it? What I'm saying is we've agreed that objective truth exists.
Yeah.
So what that means is that there is an objective answer to this question about whether the election was fair or whether it was stolen.
Yeah, agreed.
Right? There is an objective answer that is not dependent on me or you or anybody's opinion.
Agreed.
It's something that you can investigate and you can actually come to an objective answer, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a believer in the truth, right? The truth is, and I'm not saying this because I'm English, right? I've got no stake in US politics. The truth is the election was fair, right? The votes were counted, they were recounted.
I cannot weigh in. I have zero knowledge about this. Normally I would weigh in. I got nothing. I know nothing.
Oh, okay. The reason I was using this example is because I thought it might be one that was familiar.
I stay out of that garbage.
So I actually followed this story very closely. Even though I'm in the UK, I followed the question very closely because for me, this was a battle between truth and falsehood, right? Because the evidence, there was overwhelming evidence. I mean, you're going to have to take my word for it that I did look into it. And there was overwhelming evidence that the election was fair. The votes were recounted multiple times. There were independent agencies like the FBI that investigated for fraud and so on.
We get.
And so on. So
just,
let's assume. I mean, people can investigate if they want to, but let's assume that the objectively true position.
Regardless, there was regardless, there was
what that means is, if you believe in truth, it means that you should stand in solidarity with people who accepted that the election was fair. You should stand against people that.
100% agreeing with you.
Right? Now, and this, so that is now what's important is that you had Christians who believed it was fair, and you had Christians who believed that it was false.
No, again, I mean, just to cut. I think we get it, but just to cut you off here again, I think we get it. But here's my question again. I'm still not understanding this point. I think most people, I mean, you probably don't follow me, but most people, generally speaking, consider me to be one of the world's biggest assholes. I mean, I don't think I am. I'm a very nice person. I help as many people as I can. I give the best possible. I mean, I think I'm a good person. I am considered to be one of the world's greatest assholes because I only speak about true things. I only share evidence. I only share data, and I debunk and I discredit people. One of the main reasons I'm so happy that you took this, specifically you, was because you're bringing such a useful and nuanced perspective to it. But again, that's the problem, though, is your perspective is so nuanced and unique. I don't have a disagreement with it because it doesn't at all sound religious. No part of what you're saying sounds religious.
But for me, how did I actually get to this position? Because
position of understanding.
Sorry,
position of understanding your concept of God as being the absolute truth.
This is and I'm not an apologist here, right? I'm not defending the religious traditions. I've already said
no. Yeah, I get that.
What I'm doing here is I'm saying that this is my honest to God, sincere interpretation of the religious scriptures. This is what I think. Because if you look at Genesis, right at the very beginning, when Adam eats from the tree, it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
The knowledge of good and evil. That is the theme of these books from the very beginning, from the very onset, when Adam first eats from the tree. And the whole of these books, right, throughout, they are all the contrast between good and evil.
Again, but again, I mean, there's no disagreement here. So it's funny. I was expecting to disagree about stuff. There's really no disagreement here. I'll put it to you this way: if I had to choose a religion, it would be the religion of absolute truth. I'm not even kidding. Like that would be the religion. Like, listen, my religion.
Would you say that you worship truth?
No.
Oh, that's interesting. So I mean, because worship is like that you really regard truth as so important that it is a priority for you in your life over and above other things.
Well, I would say that's just your definition of worship, not the
okay, actual. Yeah, okay. I mean, this is semantics then.
Yeah, right? It's semantics. But okay, so let me put you like this then. I mean, you probably won't like hearing this, but I'll just to give you a different perspective. I feel like, I mean, just from talking to you, you more than likely would have arrived at this exact position with or without religion.
I would say that
you're very smart. You're a very smart guy. I can easily see you because I have no problem admitting at all in the slightest that if I had to like choose gun to my head a religion, it would be the religion of ultimate truth. Now the problem is we now know what that means between the two of us, you know, in this podcast. But if you say the religion of ultimate truth to most people, they're just go, oh yeah, my religion. Yeah, that's my religion. You know, but again, we're not talking about that. We're talking about your personal definition. So I guess just to pry a little bit deeper, I'll ask you the question again. Why do you feel there's any need? Well, I'll put it this way. I don't actually know how many religious books there are. I don't know. There's a lot. I've seen a lot. There's a lot.
When you say you don't mean the Holy Scriptures. You mean books written by Christians and Muslims, or do you mean the Holy Scriptures?
No, I mean everything from Buddhist. I mean all religion. I'm talking all religion. But again, my problem with religion again. I'm on board with like 99% of Buddhism. I'm on board with most of it. But what I'm not on board with when it comes to Buddhism is all of the things that they just state with zero evidence, like reincarnation. There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence for a soul. There's no evidence for any. So why are you talking about that? Why is that in the book? It shouldn't be in the book. It doesn't need to be in the book, which means we don't need the book.
So I don't really know much about Buddhism. I haven't read anything about it. So I
A
know
quick,
more
a quick
about
summary.
Christianity and Islam.
A quick summary, just not of Buddhism, but just so maybe later on dig into this a little bit. It's very interesting, but Western and Eastern religion are completely different. They have nothing in common. And there's even more religions out there that have nothing in common with either one of these two. The reason I primarily am going after Christianity and primarily going after Islam and all of my things is because, in my personal opinion, and I think most people's opinion, they are the most harmful religions around right now.
I would agree with you that the religious traditions, which I said at the very beginning,
I'm sorry, I should use traditions.
that the religious traditions, I mean, I use that term religious traditions. I mean, if you look at the history of the Catholic Church, you know, they've persecuted a lot of people, right? They persecuted people for disagreeing with them, for even believing that God was Unitarian instead of Trinitarian. That was enough to
so many reasons.
I mean, so and you know, the Muslim tradition is not innocent of that either, right? They've also persecuted people for disagreeing with them. So however, the scriptures themselves, for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, they have helped me to recognize right from wrong and true from false and good from evil.
Okay, let me ask you this then. I think I might be able to fine tune this. In the past, the scriptures have helped you come to this conclusion, right? About God being the absolute truth. And they've also helped you with many of your decisions in your life, recognizing right from wrong. And I should also say, by the way, that many times, many religious passages that I've read are very profound. And I like quite a lot of the stories, especially when you read the stories correctly, like the David and Goliath story. Everybody knows that one. But when you read that correctly, it's quite a good story, because David actually had every advantage in that story when you read it correctly. Goliath was basically a retarded autistic giant who couldn't move, and David had the most advanced weapon of the age, a sling, which is basically a bullet. So, I mean, some of the stories are really interesting when you read them. They're compelling, they're motivational, they make you want to lead a better life. Not the tradition, but do you call it scripture? Sorry, just to be clear, the scripture.
Yeah, I say scripture and then religious tradition.
The scripture itself, I can completely understand how you can use it to guide yourself morally. But then my question is, do you need it though? And could you not replace that scripture with literally anything else which said the same thing? Why does it need to be scripture?
So, I mean, I know that we're running out of time, but what I would just say is that the distinction between right and wrong, it might seem really easy, but actually it's not as easy. It's not always as easy as
it's never easy. Yeah, it's never easy.
Because there's all sorts of biases that come in. There's all sorts of, we're influenced by tradition, by culture, by upbringing. So there's all sorts of things that can affect your objectivity when it comes to choosing between right and wrong. Okay. And the religious scriptures, what I believe is that they are written by men who manage to achieve a level of objectivity that most people don't achieve. Right?
Okay. I can agree with that. I can agree with that.
So that's why they have this value, because there's lots of things that you might think, well, this is obviously right, or this is obviously wrong. And then when somebody points out, oh, but you're being biased here, or you're not looking at this objectively, and then you realize, oh, I actually got that wrong. So what these religious scriptures represent is kind of like the pinnacle of human achievement in terms of removing all sources of bias in this decision between right and wrong. And that's where, you know, it's important to kind of then look at examples of that, because, you know, I think there are examples of that, right, in the religious scriptures, which we could maybe go into another time. But that's where, when I've seen those examples where I myself was biased in my assessment of a moral situation, and then I realized that, hang on a second, these guys, they're saying something quite profound here. And that's what kind of made me think, look, you have to take these books seriously.
But
You can't just dismiss them
I
out of
think
hand.
I think what would be fun, I mean, if you're on board with it, just because I do got to get going in 1 second here, I think what would be fun is, can you tell me exactly, or send me via email, exactly the religious scripture? And I kind of want to play a game. I'm being serious. Like, I'm not being a dick. Like, I want to play a game. I want you to send me the religious scripture that you really find a lot of value in. And then I want to try to find either a philosopher, either current or from the past 500 years, who has said identical things, literally identical things, or even.
I could give you examples where you won't find a philosopher.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm saying this is because I like philosophy. I've read quite a bit from Jung and Nietzsche, and I mean, I won't get into the list, but I've never seen anything profound in religion that I've not seen in philosophy. Literally,
okay, well, I'll email this.
Please do. And again, I mean, I've been
but you have to approach it with an open mind, right? You have to.
I'm not disagreeing. Again, no
and then if you find something in the scripture and you think, well, that's actually pretty profound, right?
And I'm sure I will, but that's not. But that's not. But that's not the point. I mean, I'm sure I can read it. I'm sure I'll find it interesting, profound. At the same time, what I'll probably do is I'll take the scripture and I'll literally just write my own individual one right next to it, and then we can compare them. And I want you to tell me if they sound the same or similar or not, or if you can get on board with one over the other and the reason for that. And again, just the reason I'm kind of going out of this point is I actually think I'm pretty sure I understand your perspective. I'm pretty sure I understand your position. I really don't disagree with. I mean, really, the only thing I disagree with at the moment is, why does it need to be religious scripture instead of just, these are some good morals? Why does it need to be religious scripture?
It doesn't need to be, but the thing is that, it's like, for example, if I gave you a maths problem, right? And you solved it and you thought, yeah, I think I've got the right answer, right? And you could just use your own knowledge of maths and think, yeah, I think I've solved it. Wouldn't it be helpful if you had a maths professor, somebody really, really good at maths, who came along and checked your answer? Wouldn't that be beneficial?
Of course.
That's what I'm saying. You can use your own intuition and arrive at the correct moral decision in a situation. But isn't it nice if you've got someone who's really spent their life thinking about these things to give you a second opinion? That's where the religious scriptures come in.
Okay, so I guess I just want to end on this question then, I guess. I think it would be considerably, like, I don't even know how valuable this would be, but I think it'd be very valuable if in schools we taught things like logical fallacies and cognitive biases. Now, the reason I bring these up is because my knowledge of logical fallacies and cognitive biases that I've gained over the years or whatever, these are actually currently how I make my moral decisions. Through these means is how I make my decisions, also through my knowledge of philosophy and stuff, of course. But I basically, to the best of my abilities, I leave my stupid self out of it because I'm an idiot. But that being said, I do know, I don't want to say that's not fair. I'm usually pretty sure whether what I'm doing is a good thing or a bad thing if I have most of the information. And the only time it's been something bad is when I didn't have the information or I intentionally was a dick. That's really the only time. I've never had religious scripture. That being said, I know that I've been culturally indoctrinated to be following all of the morals of these people around me. If I was in Japan, I would have a very different set of morals. I would have a very different personality probably. Because of my current cultural location. Well, I'm not going to get too much into that, but it's very fair to say that if I grew up in Japan, I would be a very different human being, operating in a very different way than I do growing up in America, where I was traditionally surrounded mostly with Christians, who, granted, I mocked most of my childhood for being morons. But I mean, they were the kind of religious though, you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, I mean,
I apologize. I don't want to.
Yeah, we do.
I got to go. Sorry, I got a client in 2 seconds. But I really wanted to thank you for having me on, or having you coming on. I'm trying to say. I want to have you come back on if you're up for it. I love chatting with you, and I also want to chat with you about medicine too another time if you're up for that too. I really enjoyed the chat. Did I do do you think I understood your positions, or was I not going with them?
I think so. I think we got there towards the end. I think yeah, I think you did. So yeah, I think it was very productive.
I think we actually understood each other pretty well there. I was just
Yeah.
really confused. It doesn't matter, but I think we got there. Yeah, it was such a nice time talking with you. It's such a pleasure, and I hope we'll do this again soon. I'm really curious what the comments are going to be like for this video, guys. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. This was not the religious debate I was expecting, so this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. So looking forward to having you back on.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Have a great day, bud.
Yeah, you too.